Hi historians, what we're going to look at today is how to attack a paragraph that you might have to write for an assessment item. So I use what I often call the PEEP, P-E-E-P style of paragraph. When they're standalone paragraph, I don't like calling them a peel paragraph because the L in peel stands for link. And if it's a standalone paragraph, I mean, what are you linking to? Probably nothing. So often I think it's better to return to the P, but we'll come to that in a moment. Let's look at a mock-up question and some stimulus and how you might attack it. Now, this question in yellow is a question that I've put on another resource in my suite of resources out there. So you should be able to see it and look into it. Likewise, these 9 sources are connected to that task. Now, 9's a heck of a lot of sources. And one of the consequences of me having a lot of sources in this example is that you will see that I've used a lot of evidence and it's a little bit hard to work in elaborations and so on. But let's firstly focus on the first step of the task, which is to read the question. So it says, use the sources provided as well as your own knowledge and research to write a fully referenced, structured historical paragraph in response to the task. And the task is, explain the most significant features of the Holocaust between 1939 and 41. So not the entire Holocaust, not 1933 to 45, 39 to 41, the first years of the war. Now, I want you to think at this stage what you would do with that question and see if you straight away in your mind could identify what those main features are. If you can, hit pause, write them down. Now, the next stage is using those few ideas where you're already aware of what the significant features of the Holocaust might be. And by the way, you should know what the Holocaust is, and you should know that World War II started in 1939 with the invasion of Poland. After you've done that, I want you to think about what our next step is, and that's analyze the sources. Now, when you analyze the sources, I want you to genuinely engage with them. Go looking for patterns. Look at them in terms of, are there ideas here that need to be researched, thought through further? Think about the context of the sources and the ideas involved in them, and identify the key, the core usable ideas, quotes, and so forth in there. All right. Now, the process is messy. So I've also got this little diagram there just to remember you that success, people often think, is this nice, straight, neat line. The reality is it's a very, very messy process. So if you're going to go and write your paragraph and you haven't written all over your sources and you haven't interacted with them and you have not engaged with them fully and thoughtfully, then you're going to write a pretty ordinary paragraph. It's very hard to mock that up in a video like this, but I've done that. Okay? Now just have a look at some of the elements I've done there. I've repeatedly told you to annotate your notes. Go on, write all over them. Go nuts. If you've got this sheet out in front of you, I want you to do that before you do anything else. When you get a map, think about what it shows. In this particular case, the area here is representing Poland, the area here represents Russia and the Pale of Settlement. We'll write on it. Probably you'll be able to write better than I have when I've been using the draw function with a mouse. Okay? If you've got an image, identify what's in there. Point out the main features, label it up. Use color coding. If you've looked at a particular time frame, that might be something you color code. 1940-41, I've done in this dark green shade. If it seems to have a lot of emphasis on ghettos, then pick up on that. Emphasize it. A few times the word police comes up here in the yellow highlight. Emphasize that. Poland gets a number of mentions. I've marked that in pink. Russia gets a couple of mentions. I've marked that in orange. If you've thought about it, by doing these kind of color codings, you might be able to pick up on some of the significant features. I would suggest at this point, you know that one of the most significant features of the Holocaust between 1939 and 41 was the use of ghettos. You'd also know that this is the period of time where Poland becomes a significant location of the Holocaust. You might also know that in 1941, a date there involves the invasion of Russia and that becomes significant in the Holocaust. In the fluoro green, I've marked a number of times Einsatzgruppen. It comes up, the death squads come up. It's another key theme of that time period, perhaps a significant feature, and that's linked to Russia. So by colour coding, by annotating, by writing all over, by doing a little bit of research, as I've marked here, as I go looking for information I don't understand, as I draw out key quotes, key details, and recording those, and writing all over my notes anything we need, whether they be questions, thoughts, reflections, even comments like, use this. As you do this, you're starting the process of writing a really good paragraph. Let's now think about what a successful paragraph might look like. Now, this is a paragraph that I've thrown together as a Word document. I've done a little bit of editing, but because there are different criteria in Year 11 and 12 than there are in Grade 9 and 10 at the moment, and I'm making this in 2018, I've not really tied in the wording I've got here to particular criteria that might not be in place for the people watching this if they're in Grade 10 when they get to Year 11. So, there are some limitations on this source. There are some limitations on this example I'm giving you. But I did want to lay it out for you so you can see what a paragraph might look like, so we can pull it apart. Now again, the process of writing a paragraph is something that looks nothing like that successful straight line. The process of writing it is messy, and a lot of people lose confidence as they're writing paragraphs because they feel that it's not working out neatly. It never works out neatly. So, what I want you to do is have a little bit of confidence and play with the wording as you try to write your paragraph. In my box, I've got a few reminders of what a peel or peep paragraph is. We should have a clear structure where we make a point in response to the question very early. We expand upon it, we elaborate, we explain that point a little bit, then we use evidence. And at the end, we return to the point. I'd suggest to you that these E's blend together very messily like this area of scribble on the road to success. It's not always this neat. And when we break down my paragraph here, I would suggest I've used a lot of evidence, and the elaborations and the explanations are merged with the evidence. It gets messy to separate them out. And that's okay. It can lead to a good paragraph. I would suggest this is a good paragraph. So it's not always as neat as you might have come to expect of yourself. Cut yourself a little bit of slack, use the model and adapt it. Now, opening part of the paragraph should make its point. I should be able to see from the first sentence or so that you've answered the question. At the conclusion of your paragraph, I want you to return to that point. If you're writing an essay, that would be an L and it would link to something else. But you're not writing an essay in this task. You're writing just a paragraph. I'd like you to think that there's an interchange here between the two E's in the middle of peep. It's back and forth, bouncing around. I wish I could put a GIF in or something of a pinball machine. I want you to imagine your point bouncing around like a silver ball, connecting up expansions, elaborations, explanations, and evidence, bouncing around back and forth. It's messy through the middle. It's not always neat and clear. It moves on. So let's explore that. I've color-coded for you. Here's our point. The most significant features of the Holocaust between 1939 and 1941 included Jew hunts, coordinated by the Nazi order police, the creation of poverty-stricken and epidemic-ridden ghettos in Nazi-occupied Poland, and the large-scale murder of Jews and others at the hands of the Einsatzgruppen. So in my opening point, you can see that I've identified three significant features of the period 1939-41 during the Holocaust. We should see those ideas mirrored, not exactly the same, not just a repeat of the sentence, but similar at the very end. So let's have a look. Therefore, linking to the bit in the middle, the forced enclosure of Jews in overcrowded, disease-ridden, urban Polish ghettos, routine and murderous Jew hunts, that's at the top as well, at the hand of the order police, and brutal mass murders by the Nazi Einsatzgruppen death squads were defining features of the second phase of the Holocaust. That sounds like saying the same thing in different words. Let's now pick up on what's happening in the middle. It gets messy. It's the blue and the pink mixed together. Let's have a look. Take a moment, pause if you want to. Have a look at what we've got there. Certainly it's hard to move from my point straight to evidence without some elaboration, explanation or expansion. So in the first bit of blue up here, I have had to say 1939 represented the start of World War II. And I talk about large Jewish populations in Eastern Europe being defenceless at the face of victories by the Nazi armies as they've invaded places like Poland and Russia. So that needs to be said. And I've also tried to pick up on the motivation of some of the elements of the Nazi regime being anti-Semitic. So I put in some of my words there. I've also used a little bit of background evidence, pogroms, persecution, pogroms, murder at the hands. This is elaborations explaining expansion in that little section there. But what I'm trying to indicate by this blue line running down either side is as I'm using my evidence, and the dark blue, by the way, is just the overlap of the pink and the blue, just the way the highlighters work together. What I'm trying to indicate is that these blue areas are both background information and using evidence. As I come towards the end of the paragraph, I start to draw some conclusions together, and in a way they are expansions, elaborations, explanations before I return to my point. What I want you to do at this point is I want you to hit pause and read through this example paragraph and look at how that interchange between expansion and elaborations work. Take a moment to see if it's developing a logic. Take a moment to see if the bits in the middle, the blue and the pink combined, are answering the question. Have a look how evidence is used. Look at the shape and form of the references. There's a few little oddities in there we're going to explain in a moment. And think how you might construct your own paragraphs in the tasks you're working on. So hit pause now. Take a moment to think. The clean version, without highlighting and markups and writing all over it, the clean version of this is in your OneNote. So get that out. If you want to, write on it, scribble on it, highlight, work out the different sections. See if you would agree with where the P's are and the two E's, where that interchanges. See if you fully agree. Hopefully you can see that messiness of success in the middle that I'm wanting you to look at. Right, so hopefully you've taken a moment to pause, think this through, play with your own ideas, and maybe see if you can adapt the ideas in this to your own writing. You should have identified point at the start and the end. If you don't do that in your own work, maybe it's a problem. You should be able to identify that through the middle we have a messy interchange of elaborations, explanations, expansions, and the use of evidence, and that sometimes using evidence expands, elaborates, and explains your point. Hopefully you've also noticed the importance of references, and that's where I want to go now. Our paragraph with in-text references is all very well, but if the in-text references are not linked to a list of references or a bibliography, then we're missing a very, very important component. Your list of references and your bibliography are connected inherently at their very core to the in-text references themselves. In-text references are a shorthand version of the full bibliographic detail. They are two sides of the same coin. So let's have a look at how this should appear in its simplest form. Surname, year, page for a book. When I see the in-text reference within my paragraph, it directs me to your list of references, and I've followed that pattern all the way through. Now, we'll come to our orange Yad Vashem in a moment, because if you look at it, they'll put an I in here. I've added that in. 2018, I meaning one. I could have used the letter A if I wanted to. This is a really important little thing to be aware of. The two Yad Vashem sources, if they appeared in my bibliography with no other distinguishing feature, would have been exactly the same. They were both made in 2018. So in this form of referencing, I need a distinguishing way of doing it, and that's to add something to the date of one of them. Notice also the trick that I've got here, and you can go back and look at it more carefully later on. I can take the author's surname out of brackets and just have the year in the page. I can also put the surname outside a bracket. I can have the year and put a date down the end. Have a look at how that's occurring in different places where it's just shown up. So we've got a number of ways in which we can split a reference up. It doesn't have to be done in the same way all the time. I can actually put the author's name into a sentence. You can see I've done this in a few spots. Okay, there are different ways. I guess again, I'm saying the path to success is messy. There's variations we can bring to our work now. If we have a look then at Browning, I've done similar with his. I've gone Browning, 1998, page 227. Then I've gone Browning, 1998, 17, and out of brackets I've written a bit and then put page 127 again. I can split it up. Have a look at how those references are split. One final tip, or almost final tip, is that when there's a primary source being quoted by an author such as Browning, I can go in the brackets, the name of that original speaker, I'll take away the bracket, the circle for you, Wilhelm Koob, okay, and I say the important word in Browning, 1998, page 23. So, remember, when you're doing a task like this, you must critically use the evidence, okay, in your quotes, in your ideas. You must have a list of references or a bibliography. You've got to have in-text references and use them correctly. There's rules about the placement and the format, and there are some variations allowed. Excellent.